My parents told me, "We can't afford to send you to college," but they covered my sister's tuition in full. My mother smiled as if IT were obvious. "Of course, we invest in the daughter who deserves IT." My sister laughed. "Come on, sis, you look perfect as a restaurant waiter." But 1 year later they would be begging me. First of all, many people's only watch stories and don't subscribe, but everyone knows subscribe is a free way to help me, so please press the subscribe button. Now, enjoy the story. Elizabeth Parker still vividly remembers her father's words. "Lizzie, college is a waste. It's not for you." It was the night of her 18th birthday. On the way home after dining out with the family, she had mustered up the courage to broach the subject in the car. "Dad, I'm thinking of applying to the state university." Richard's stern profile was illuminated by the streetlights reflected in the rearview mirror. His face remains unchanged to this day. He had worked as an insurance company executive for 30 years, always valuing planning and efficiency. It would be a waste of money. With just those few words, her dreams for the future were crushed. In the Parker household, education was everything. Her father himself was a graduate of an elite university, and her mother Diane, as a high school teacher, always kept a strict eye on the children's academic performance. Diane, as a typical Tiger mother, checked her two daughters' homework every night and assigned additional studying if test scores weren't perfect. The problem was that Elizabeth was ordinary. She wasn't stupid by any means, but she wasn't a genius either. In high school, she studied diligently, but her grades were always just slightly above average. Where she truly shined was in her interactions with others. She was good at making friends and was well liked by teachers. Empathy and thoughtfulness were her strengths, but in the Parker household, these were considered weak traits. "Being able to calculate quickly is more important than getting along with people," Diane would often say. In contrast was her younger sister Jessica. She was literally a child prodigy. She swept piano competitions at 10, solved high school level math problems at 12, and was selected as the state representative for the Science Olympiad at 16. The walls of her room were covered with numerous certificates and awards. Jessica had inherited her father's composure and her mother's competitive spirit, combining them with her own genius talents. From an early age, she was special in the family. A special cake on her birthday, the biggest present at Christmas, and most of all, she received the unconditional praise and expectations of both parents. "Jessica is special," Diane would often boast to neighbors. "She has a future." The implication was clear: Elizabeth didn't have a future. On high school graduation day, Elizabeth quietly completed the ceremony while her classmates proudly showed off their college hats and t-shirts. That night, her parents invited relatives for what they called a celebration party. But it was actually to celebrate Jessica's national victory in the science fair. Elizabeth's graduation was just a side note. When Aunt Amy asked, "Isn't she going to college?" Diane shrugged slightly. "We don't have the money." That was a lie. The Parker family lived a comfortable middle-class life. Richard earned a good salary as an executive, and Diane had a stable income as a teacher. It was just that they had deemed Elizabeth's education not worth investing in. After graduation, Elizabeth began working as a hostess at a local upscale restaurant, Bella Luna. She initially thought of it as a temporary job. However, her warm smile and thoughtfulness quickly won the hearts of regular customers. And after 6 months, she was promoted to floor manager, the youngest ever. As work became busier, she visited her parents' home less frequently. 7 years later, news came that Jessica had been accepted to medical school. The Parker home was filled with a celebratory mood. To pay for her tuition, Richard withdrew part of his retirement funds, and Diane sold land she had inherited from her parents. In total, $200,000 was prepared to cover 4 years of tuition and living expenses. "It's an investment in my talented daughter," Richard explained to relatives. "When she becomes a first-rate doctor in the future, it will all be worth it." Elizabeth heard about this at a rare family gathering. Across the table, her parents were enthusiastically talking about Jessica's talent and future prospects. "We struggled to help her develop her talents, but it was all worth it," Diane said with narrowed eyes. "You said we didn't have money for college," Elizabeth said quietly, and the room froze. "We have it now," Diane said, somewhat irritably. "Besides, in Jessica's case it's different," Richard interrupted. "Jessica is special. The educational investment in her will definitely pay off." Those words opened all the small wounds that had accumulated over 7 years. In Elizabeth's heart, a deep recognition was engraved that her parents had chosen Jessica over her. It was a painful proof that family love was conditional. That night, she vowed to herself for the first time, "Someday I'll show them. I'll make them recognize my worth." Little did anyone expect that someday would come much sooner than imagined. "We're going to dinner for your father's retirement celebration. Please be considerate as usual." Elizabeth sighed deeply as she listened to Diane's call while driving. She glanced at the gift on her dashboard. An expensive brandy to celebrate her father's retirement and her mother's favorite perfume. She had used her lunch break to go buy them. Of course, as always. Elizabeth fully understood what that meant. Going along with things, meeting expectations, And above all, not outshining Jessica. Jessica will be there too. She's achieved wonderful grades in medical school and seems to have a special announcement today. On the other end of the phone, Diane's voice bounced with pride. I'm looking forward to it, Elizabeth lied, noticing how natural her voice had become. She felt the results of 7 years of practice. Standing at the entrance to the Parker home, the familiar tension enveloped her. When she rang the doorbell, Diane appeared immediately. Lizzie. Finally here. Her mother gave her a formal hug, then immediately turned around. Richard, Lizzie's here. When she entered the living room, her father Richard merely nodded, raising his face from the newspaper. And on the sofa next to him sat Jessica, dressed in a refined dress with a perfect hairstyle. Long time no see. Jessica's smile had the usual hint of superiority. It was an expression that hadn't changed since childhood. It's been a while, Jessica, Elizabeth replied, placing her gifts down. How's medical school? Great, Jessica said, casually brushing her hair back. Actually, I have wonderful news. That's for the dinner table, Diane interrupted, heading toward the kitchen. Lizzie, can you help with the table setting? The dining room table had 4 seats, just like in the old days, places for Elizabeth, Richard, Diane, and Jessica. The dishes were special occasion porcelain, with silver cutlery perfectly arranged. How do you feel about your retirement, Dad? Elizabeth asked as she sat down at the table. Wonderful. Richard showed a slight smile for the first time. After 35 years of looking at insurance numbers, it's enough. Let's toast. Diane raised her wine glass to Richard's years of achievement and his new life ahead. Everyone clinked glasses, and Elizabeth silently thought of another toast in her heart. To my new life. As the main dish of roast beef was served, the conversation naturally shifted to Jessica. The professor particularly appreciated my research paper, she began proudly. He said there's no precedent for undergraduate research at this level. That's my Jessica. Diane's eyes sparkled. You always exceed expectations. So what's this wonderful news? Richard asked. Jessica took a deep breath and announced with a bright smile, I've been selected for a special training program at Johns Hopkins University Hospital. The table erupted in cheers. Congratulations, wonderful. Her parents' proud faces. The way they rejoiced as if it were their own victory. That's truly amazing, Elizabeth said sincerely. She acknowledged her sister's talent was genuine. By the way, Lizzie, Diane suddenly turned to her. How are you doing lately? Still working as a waitress at that restaurant? Hostess, Mom, she corrected. Actually, I have good news too. I was recently promoted to area manager at the restaurant. A moment of silence. Well, that's nice. Diane's voice lacked excitement. She continued while poking at her food with her fork. I ran into your high school classmate Michael Johnson the other day. After graduating from Harvard, he's become a resident at a major hospital in Chicago. The implied message was clear. See how far ahead someone who started at the same place as you has gone. Michael was a good kid, Elizabeth replied, feigning calm. But I'm satisfied with my career too. I receive high praise from customers and am trusted by the owner. Restaurant manager, Richard said, almost to himself. If you had gone to college, you could have had a better job. Those words broke the thread of emotion she had been suppressing for years. College? Elizabeth's voice trembled slightly. The college I wanted to attend, the college I wasn't allowed to go to because there was no money. Tension ran across the table. Lizzie, today is a special day. Don't bring up old stories, Diane admonished. Old stories? Elizabeth slowly put down her napkin. How did you manage to pay for Jessica's medical school? That's Richard was at a loss for words. Why couldn't you afford college for me, but you can pay the full amount for Jessica? Silence filled the dining room. Diane met her husband's eyes, then raised her face as if she had made a decision. An unexpected smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. Isn't it obvious? She said matter-of-factly. You have to invest in a talented daughter. A sharp pain pierced Elizabeth's chest. It was confirmation of what she had suspected for years. She was the inferior child in the family. A child not worth investing in. Mom, she was speechless. It's the truth, Diane continued calmly. Jessica has a bright future. Investment in her will return many times over. You? She hesitated for a moment as if searching for words. You have a different path. A different path? Elizabeth's voice shook. Being a restaurant waiter suits Big Sis best, Jessica said with a giggle. They say everyone has something they're good at, right? I have medicine, and Big Sis has carrying plates. Her parents didn't stop her. Rather, there was even a faint smile at the corners of Richard's mouth. Elizabeth felt something hot welling up in her eyes. But she had no intention of showing tears. She slowly rose from her chair and placed her napkin on the table. Excuse me. She straightened her back and left the dining room with composed steps. On her way to the entrance, she noticed family photos on the wall. Photos of proud parents standing around a smiling Jessica in the center. Elizabeth stood at the edge, with a somewhat out-of-place expression. Outside, the cool night air caressed her cheeks. She got into her car and took a deep breath before starting the engine. They don't understand, she murmured quietly. They don't know yet that in a year they'll be begging me. As the car's headlights illuminated the dark road, Elizabeth renewed her determination. This would be the last humiliation. The next time she saw them, everything would be different. Welcome to Bella Luna. 3 weeks had passed since that night. The wounds were deep, but she never brought them to work. Rather, she had turned that pain into a driving force. It's always a pleasure to see you again, Elizabeth, said Marcus Green, a famous real estate tycoon in the city, and his wife Charlotte. Can you prepare our usual table? Of course, Mr. Green, she responded with a perfect smile, guiding them to the prime window seat. Over the past 3 years, Elizabeth had built trust relationships with many regular customers as the face of the restaurant. Her memory was phenomenal, not just names, but also preferred seats, allergy information, anniversaries, and even the educational progress of their children. Elizabeth, a moment please. It was Antonio Russo, the owner of Bella Luna, a mild-mannered Italian in his 60s. He had started his business 30 years ago with a small trattoria and now owned 3 restaurants in the city. Of course, Antonio. She gave a quick glance to the floor staff and headed to the owner's private room. Sit down. Antonio indicated the chair across from his desk. I have something special to discuss today. Elizabeth, how many years have you been working with us? It's been 7 years, she answered. I started as a hostess, and then and now as floor manager. You've doubled my Bella Luna's revenue, Antonio continued. Customers come asking for you, staff adore you, and most importantly, you understand the business. He took out a stack of documents from his desk drawer. What is this? She asked. An opportunity. Antonio's eyes shone. I'm planning to open a new location downtown. I want you to be the general manager there. Elizabeth's eyes widened. General manager? It pains me to see your talent buried, Antonio said with a serious expression. I know you're concerned about not having gone to college, but in the restaurant business, experience and intuition are more important than degrees. He stood up from his chair and stood in front of a family photo on the wall. My father was a shoemaker. He couldn't go to school and couldn't write, but he was a genius at reading people's hearts, Antonio reminisced. You have the same talent. You instinctively understand what people want. Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. For years, she had continued to doubt her own worth. Her parents' words had unknowingly taken root in her heart. I have no value. I'm not worth investing in. Thank you, Antonio, she said with deep gratitude. But honestly, I'm also anxious. Can I do it? You can, Antonio smiled. Rather, I need you. But there's one condition. What is it? I want you to take evening business courses, to learn the basics of accounting and management. Even with talent, you need tools. Elizabeth's new life began. During the day, she rushed around launching the new store Bella Luna Moderna, and at night, she studied in business courses at the community college. She hardly had time to sleep, but there was a new light in her eyes. The concept for the new store was modern Italian cuisine with traditional hospitality. She was involved in everything from menu development to interior design to staff recruitment. Antonio respected her judgment and only gave advice when necessary. Let's make this wall color a warmer tone, she instructed the interior designer. I want customers to feel the comfort of being at home. The night before the opening, she walked alone through the completed interior. The tables were perfectly arranged, and candlelight softly illuminated the walls. In the kitchen, the new chef was busy preparing for tomorrow. My restaurant, she whispered. Formally, it belonged to Antonio, but this space contained her soul. This was what she had wanted to prove to her parents. 3 months after Bella Luna Moderna opened, reservations are already booked 2 months in advance. A local newspaper reporter was holding a microphone to Elizabeth. Within just a few weeks of opening, this restaurant had become the most talked about place in town. What's the secret to your success? Elizabeth thought for a moment, then answered, treating customers like family. The food must be perfect, but what's even more important is how people feel here. That was what she excelled at, understanding people's feelings and providing what they wanted before they asked. What her parents had called weak traits had now become her greatest weapon. The success of the restaurant attracted media attention, and eventually customers began to visit from neighboring cities. Antonio was impressed with Elizabeth's talent, and gave her more responsibility. A year later, she was promoted to director, overseeing the operations of all 3 restaurants. That girl is special, Antonio told his wife. She has both the fire I had when I was young, and the wisdom I learned as I grew older. On her 30th birthday, Elizabeth received her business management diploma from the community college. Antonio and the staff of Bella Luna attended the ceremony. There was no congratulatory contact from her family. What will you do next? Antonio asked at the graduation party. Elizabeth answered with a smile. I want to have my own restaurant. Those words were a dream she had cherished for years. Having learned and grown under Antonio, she was now ready to fly with her own wings. I knew it, Antonio said happily. That's why I prepared this. What he handed her was another stack of documents. It's a franchise agreement, he explained, using the Bella Luna name and know how to open your own restaurant. The location, interior, everything at your discretion. Elizabeth took the documents, turning the pages with trembling hands. This was a contract that would change her life. But the funding. The bank will give you a loan, Antonio said confidently. With your track record and my guarantee, there's no problem. Plus, I'm offering special terms with no royalties for the first year. Her heart was filled with gratitude. Antonio believed in her and invested in her, something her parents had never done. On the opening day of Elizabeth's, there was a line in the street. She had become the owner of a restaurant bearing her own name. While it was a Bella Luna franchise, Elizabeth's personality was evident throughout. The menu featured traditional Italian dishes with her unique twists. The interior had warm color tones, with works by local artists adorning the walls. "Elizabeth, this place is wonderful," said Charlotte Green, a longtime regular customer. "It's just like you, warm, elegant, and comfortable." "Thank you, Charlotte," Elizabeth embraced her. "I couldn't have come this far without regulars like you." 6 months after opening, Elizabeth's became the most difficult restaurant to book in the city. A local business magazine featured her as an entrepreneur to watch, and she was even nominated for the Chamber of Commerce's Businesswoman of the Year award. Success brought changes to every aspect of her life. She purchased a new condominium downtown, and went on a European trip she had dreamed of for years. In Italy she learned authentic cuisine, and in France she toured wineries. Her Instagram was filled with beautiful food photos and scenery from around the world. Likes and comments flooded in from former classmates. Some even contacted her with "long time no see, how are you?" including those who had almost ignored her in high school. However, there was no reaction from her family, who should have been watching her success most closely. Elizabeth occasionally secretly peeked at her mother's Facebook. There were many posts boasting about Jessica's achievements in medical school, but not a word about her. She didn't contact her family. No phone calls to report her success, no boastful emails. She was quietly walking her own path, believing that someday they would recognize her worth, and that day came sooner than expected. At the end of summer, nearly a year after the restaurant opened, her assistant approached her. "There's a phone call for you, it's from your mother." Elizabeth froze for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. "Hello, Mom?" Her voice was surprisingly calm. "What's up, Lizzie?" On the other end of the phone, Diane's voice was trembling. "We need your help." Elizabeth smiled quietly. Somehow, she had sensed this moment would come. "What's wrong?" she asked again. "Jessica, something terrible has happened." Diane's voice was on the verge of tears. "Please, could you meet with us to hear about it?" Elizabeth looked down at her schedule. The following week was busy with new menu development, but she had been living for this moment. "All right," she answered. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m., at my restaurant." When Elizabeth hung up the phone, her heart was filled with a sense of victory and, at the same time, a strange tranquility. The moment she had longed for years, the moment her family would recognize her worth, was finally about to arrive. The special private room at Elizabeth's was usually reserved for important customers or business meetings. Today it was prepared for special guests. At exactly 2 p.m., a uniformed hostess escorted Diane, Richard, and Jessica to the restaurant. All three had obvious tension on their faces. Jessica in particular was pale, with dark circles of fatigue under her eyes. Elizabeth stood up and gave a formal greeting. However, her eyes were fixed on Jessica. Jessica's usual confidence had vanished. "Would you like something to drink first?" Elizabeth calmly suggested. "How about wine? Our new Italian Pinot Grigio is getting rave reviews." "Just water, please," Richard answered in a stiff voice. Elizabeth signaled to the staff, and glasses of water were placed in front of the three. "Your restaurant is wonderful," Diane said in a nervous voice. "I had no idea you were so successful." "Yes, thankfully," Elizabeth smiled. "I was even featured on the cover of the local business magazine. But I guess you didn't see it." An uncomfortable silence followed. "So, what did you need?" she asked quietly. "On the phone you mentioned something terrible." The three exchanged glances, and finally Richard let out a deep sigh. "Lizzie, this is a family matter," he began gravely. "The situation is serious." "Dad, I haven't been treated as a family member for years," Elizabeth calmly pointed out. "It's strange to suddenly hear family matter." "That's not true," Diane argued. "You've always been our daughter." "Really?" Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "Whose words were you have to invest in a talented daughter?" Silence fell again. Finally, Jessica spoke up. Her voice was trembling. "I've gotten into terrible trouble. I'm listening," Elizabeth said in a neutral tone. "Neither cold nor warm." Jessica looked at her parents, then timidly began to speak. "During my medical school training, I made a mistake with a patient's prescription. It was a serious error. The patient's condition temporarily worsened, but their life wasn't in danger." "Is that all?" Elizabeth asked. "No." Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. "After that, I did something stupid. I posted information about that patient on social media, intending to talk to a friend." "What?" Elizabeth showed dismay for the first time. "It's a privacy violation," Diane said, catching her breath. "She's being sued by the university and hospital." "And to make matters worse," Richard continued, "the patient was a relative of a city dignitary. We're being asked for $500,000 in settlement money. And," Diane said with a trembling voice, "Jessica has been suspended from medical school and possibly even expulsion." Elizabeth took a sip of water on the table to gather her thoughts. "So, what do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Money," Diane answered frankly. "We retired people can't come up with $500,000. I applied for a loan with our house as collateral, but was rejected due to age and income status." Richard's shoulders drooped. "The only one we can turn to is you." "Me?" Elizabeth laughed softly. "You're asking the daughter who wasn't worth investing in? Lizzie, please." Diane reached out imploringly. "I'm sorry for the past. I never meant to hurt you back then." "Don't lie." Elizabeth's voice was ice cold. "You didn't invest in me. You stole my college dream." But now, here I am, on my own. Sis, Jessica said through tears, I'm truly sorry. I want to take back everything I said back then. Seeing your success, I was maybe jealous. Jealous? Elizabeth asked curiously. You're a genius, Jessica. The talented daughter, loved by her parents and given everything, but now I'm about to lose everything, Jessica sobbed. My dream of becoming a doctor. My future. Elizabeth stood up and gazed out the window. In front of the restaurant, staff were smiling as they greeted customers. The world she had built through hard work. That the day would come when you would need me, she said quietly. How ironic. She returned to her seat and looked at the three with a serious expression. $500,000 I can afford it, she said. But I won't give it for nothing. We'll accept any conditions, Richard hastily said. Just name them. Elizabeth slowly raised her face and looked into the eyes of each family member. I'll set my conditions. If you accept them, I'll provide the money. The three held their breath and stared at her. In Elizabeth's eyes, there was no trace of the hurt girl from 7 years ago. What stood there was a woman who knew her worth and had carved out her own destiny. 6 months later, the opening party for the new branch of Elizabeth's was a great success. The mayor and local dignitaries had gathered to celebrate Elizabeth's success. She walked around the restaurant, exchanging words with guests with a smile. Elizabeth, it's wonderful, said Charlotte, Marcus Green's wife. To be so successful in just 2 years is phenomenal. Thank you, Charlotte, she smiled. It's all thanks to your support. She glanced at the corner of the restaurant with her champagne glass. She could see 3 figures sitting at a table, her father Richard, her mother Diane, and her sister Jessica. Unlike other guests, they looked a bit tense rather than festive. Excuse me, she told Charlotte, and headed to the family table. Everyone enjoying themselves? She asked gently. It's a wonderful restaurant, Lizzie, Diane said with genuine admiration. I'm proud of you. Those words were something never heard from the Diane of old. Since the day of his conditions 6 months ago, many things had changed. Elizabeth had paid the $500,000, but it wasn't just financial relief. Her conditions were clear. First, Jessica would leave medical school and work in the real world. She had to work as a general staff member at Elizabeth's restaurant chain for 6 months. Second, her parents would attend family therapy sessions once a month as a first step to heal past wounds and build new relationships. And third, Richard would volunteer in a mentoring program for young people at the community college, so he himself could learn that academic credentials weren't the only path to success. Message from the boss. Jessica, now a waitress at the restaurant, approached. She looked like a different person from 6 months ago. Her hair was simply arranged, and in her uniformed eyes dwelled humility. What message? Elizabeth laughed. There's a table 7 with no order yet, Jessica said jokingly. The chef is waiting apparently. Thank you, I'll take care of it right away. Elizabeth lightly patted her sister's shoulder. Over these 6 months, Jessica had learned the job from the bottom up. At first, there were constant complaints, but gradually she changed. She learned the difficulties of customer service, the importance of teamwork, and most of all, the value of understanding people's feelings. Lizzie, Richard called out. At last week's mentoring session, I talked about you, about how you built your own business after finishing high school. What was the reaction? She asked. They were inspired, he said proudly. Thank you for teaching me that I was wrong. Diane silently watched the exchange between the two. Tears glistened in her eyes. Lizzie, let me say one thing, she said in a trembling voice. I love you. But I didn't understand you. I don't want forgiveness. I just want you to know. Elizabeth took her mother's hand. I know, Mom. Fireworks shot up into the night sky, coloring the sky visible from the restaurant windows. It was a special performance celebrating the opening of the new store. Looking up at the fireworks with her family, Elizabeth thought about the journey of her life. She would probably never completely forget the wounds she received from her family. But now, she was proud of who she had become, having grown beyond those wounds. What will you do next? Jessica asked. After all this success, don't you have any more goals? Elizabeth answered with a smile. Next, I'm thinking of starting a hotel chain, called Elizabeth's Retreat. Amazing, Jessica said sincerely. Will you let me help? I want to learn this time, really. Of course, Elizabeth squeezed her sister's hand. We're family, after all. Under the fireworks blooming in the night sky, along with the budding of new relationships, her story continued into a new chapter.